Hi, welcome back. It's Laurie Morse with our Creative Healing Conversations. I think this is our fifth or sixth conversation now. And today's conversation is going to be centered around community and courage and creativity in order to create clarity for whatever it is you're trying to do. Whether you're looking to heal something in yourself, whether you're looking to up-level your business or create more abundance, whether you're looking to become better at something in your own, world of yourself, or whether you're looking to cultivate more love, whether that's a romantic partnership, an upgraded partnership with any of your children or your friends, or even to attract more friends. The sky's the limit, basically. So our three, if you don't already know this, if you haven't watched any of the other videos, I am devoted to the blend of healing through the creative process. So that's my thing. It's a creative healing process journey that I take people on in order to transform energy that isn't working into energy that is more serving. And I'm going to give you a little visual of what I actually mean, because I've been sort of talking about it, but I think a visual will be helpful. And then I think I might have said last time that this time, but it's going to be the next time that we're actually going to do a mini creative healing process together. So be sure and join me next week. That's going to be the topic for next week is the difference between mind-body intelligence and learning how to listen to our deeper wisdom, our deeper intelligence, and our guidance through doing creative healing processes, because that's like our weight training, so to speak. That's what builds our muscle in being able to connect into that wisdom and intelligence that lives in our body. So I don't want to get too off the track on that, because that's for next week. So join me then. But our three primary points for our time together this week is going to be minding the gap. I think it's the British that say mind the gap. And I think it has to do with the trains and that space in between the platform and where the train tracks and the train is, and there's a gap in between there. And, it's dangerous if we fall into the gap. So there's this saying, mind the gap, but that also applies to what we're going to talk about today. So that's our first topic. Our second topic is what it means to, especially for women, to be in community. And I'll kind of elaborate a little bit more on that. And then our third point for the day is the courage to connect. So courage being the theme, the courage to connect with our creative life force in order to transform energy in our life. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where most of us spin our wheels, because we think we're changing. We think we're actually making things better, and sometimes we are, but we should be able to forever transform old energy blocks, whatever we want to call them, those hurdles and challenges that continually show themselves and have been maybe even for decades. We should be able to transform that energy and let it get served back to us, so to speak, in a higher form of energy, so that we may keep moving forward. We may keep taking our steps. And what I run across and have been running across, pardon me, I have an itch, for so long, is that we get stuck. And I'll show you in my little visual today, my little show and tell, why that is and how we can move ourselves beyond those places of being stuck. So let's talk about the gap. So one of the things, we all have default modes, right? So one of the default modes for women is always just defaulting to being hard on ourselves. That just seems to be a pretty common default mode for most women that I know, unless they've been consciously aware of it and they've been willing to transform that default mode from being hard on themselves to being in a place of more self-acceptance and self-compassion. Now, we've talked about the 5 elements before, and the wood element is liver, gallbladder, right? Those are the organ systems that are that make up the wood element. The wood element is responsible for the smooth flow of chi in the body. It's also the element that when we're self-critical and self-judgment, it can cause that element to kind of constrict and bind up, especially the liver. We ask a lot of our liver in our Western culture. It is the organ of detoxification, and that's true in Western medicine too. But in Chinese medicine, as we've talked about for that element, it's got a lot more reach and it has a lot more scope of function in the body. So it easily can become edgy and cranky and irritable, and self-criticism and self-judgment often come from that tension in the liver. One of the antidotes to that edge of the liver, that critical, self-critical and judgmental edge. And by the way, it all starts with ourselves, right? The criticism, the self-criticism and the self-judgment, but that doesn't leave everyone else out. Most of us who are self-critical and self-judgment can be easily as critical and judgment of others too. So this is a two-way street, but I think it's valuable to always start with ourselves, because we can't really give anything to another that we haven't given to ourselves. So that's sort of the first stop in the train route, so to speak, when we're minding the gap. So the antidote for self-criticism and self-judgment is self-compassion. It's compassion. And when we consciously reach for a level of self-compassion and self-acceptance, we change that energy in the liver. We actually soften that edge, and that sort of razor's edge of criticism and judgment begins to soften. And when we reach for that more and more, and we create a practice out of that, it becomes our default mode. Sure, we might sometimes slip into that older default mode of self-criticism, but really the new default mode is the self-acceptance and self-compassion. And how do we get there? I mean, that sounds like a lovely plan, and some might even say it's a bit lofty, but I can guarantee you that creative healing processes will walk you there if you are willing to take those steps through your own creative process. So let me show you my little visual. So let's pretend, see if you can see this, that you are here. So this is where you are on any given subject. But let's say, and you can pick any given subject, let me see if I slide this over there, yeah, that matters to you, and call that your desire. So, let's say you want to transform a health issue, or let's say you want to find the love of your life, or let's say you want to find the courage to do a creative healing process, or let's say you want to double your income next year. There's so many things, right? Let's say you want to feel like more of a compassionate and courageous person from your heart and not your mind. The list is so long. In fact, it's not a bad idea to start jotting down in your journal writing some of the things that are really important to you, especially a couple of the ones that you've tried a lot of things to overcome and move yourself beyond the block, so to speak, and it's not been easy, and you keep finding yourself still in the same place that you are here. So what the gap between where you are and where you want to be, this is the gap to mind, right? And usually what's in those gaps for each one of us are any number of energy or mindsets or beliefs that are not serving us. They're not serving us to walk the bridge from where we are to where we want to go. They're always poking up and they're blocking our pathway. So we end up just going back. That's what most of us do. We get blocked by any number of these beliefs, thoughts, limitations, whatever word you want to put to that. They poke their ugly heads up, so to speak, and then we feel blocked by it, and we just think, well, might as well go back to where I was. I don't know how to get past that. The point is that all of this is transformable. All of it can be transmuted. This is the energy that I mentioned just a minute ago that can be transformed and then fed back to you in a higher serving form, so that it actually gives you the energy and the vitality to walk on this path. And this is true for everybody. Anybody who wants something really bad and they're here, this is the energy of being here, and this is a different energy. So there's always going to be things to transform and things to shift and change in order to get from where you are to here. So you can take, if you know that you have a fear of, let I'm trying to think of a quick and easy example. Let's say you have an issue with your thyroid. Okay, now the thyroid is in this area of the body, and it's often on the non-physical level, it often refers to not being able to speak our truth, or holding back something that we really want to speak or say, or being angry and upset about how someone treats us and we're not able to sort of stand up for ourselves. Let's just use that as an example. And there's more to it than that, but give me some latitude here as we're just sort of playing with the idea of this, right? And where we really want to be is respected, and we want to be able to speak our truth in a way that feels centered and compassionate to us, right? Sometimes we don't do it because we aren't sure how it's going to come out, speaking our truth. We don't even trust ourselves to say it in a way that feels compassionate for the situation. Sometimes it comes out edgier than we want, or because we're so angry at something, it comes out laced with our own anger. So we just hold it all in. As an example, we hold it all in, and that energy just sort of festers in this part of our body. Anyway, so there's a fear of not knowing what to say. There's a mistrust of our own capacity to speak our truth with clarity and with compassion, and even holding our center in a way that we're so clear about what's true for us, that we can deliver it and not be knocked off our center by how it may or may not be received by the other person. It may be received well, and it may upset them. And so we have to be able to find a way of holding our own center so that we can actually speak our truth and allow the person to have their own response to what is true for us. Where do you find the words? How do you know how to say them with compassion? All of those things are what's sort of gurgling in this cesspool underneath the bridge that feel like alligators are going to jump up and bite our feet off as we're trying to walk over to where we want to be. You can use another example too. Let's say you're here. Let's say you're in a job and you want to have a business. And so this is this ideal business, this idea you have in your mind that just won't seem to leave you alone, and you feel like you really need to do it. And there's all kinds of fear, right? Like, how do I even do that? What if it fails? Where do I find the money to do that? So those are all the alligators nipping at your feet as you're trying to walk over. So you just end up going back. You're like, well, I don't want to lose my foot for this, I mean, that's kind of the way it feels, right? It's really, really scary. So doing a creative healing process around the stuff that's in the gap, the stuff that's in the water below the, in the moat, so to speak, as you're trying to move from where you are to this place of where you can just feel it in your bones, in your cells, that it's calling you, and it matters to you. It's important to you, and it becomes more and more frustrating the more times you try, and the more you have to go back, and then the more this sort of beckons you, right? It becomes really, really. Well, it's painful. I've been in that place where I've been here and I want to be here so bad, and I just don't know how to get there. Actually, this is how this all came to pass, is that I have been in that place so many times that I had to figure out how to get myself over the damn bridge to where I want to go on multiple subjects, right? So it's the transformation of this energy to actually become like a canoe for me, to carry me over with a feeling of safety, centeredness, and fun and joy and ease, rather than, this sort of scary feeling. So anyway, that's the visual I have for you. That's the gap that needs to be minded, so to speak. And it's really hard to walk over that bridge without finding a way to some degree of self-acceptance and self-compassion. Now, we build that. That's a muscle to build. But I'm saying it because if you leave that out of the picture, it'll be very difficult to get across that bridge. So the second thing I want to talk about is community, because women work better in community. It's really hard for women to go it alone. In fact, when women go it alone, and we've all done this, especially in a Western culture, we tend to burn ourselves out. So energy transforms, love grows, trust in ourselves grows when we are willing to walk through our stuff, to go over that bridge in a community, in a container, in like a sacred container where you feel held, and you know that women, other women who are empowering women, not women who are, you know, the type who tear you down, but empowering type women, when they have your back, that is literally a recipe for growing your wings and flying. I've experienced all of that in my own life, right? I've experienced doing it alone, kind of dipping my toe in community, and then allowing myself to be held in a sacred container and by other women and in community, in a way that I felt like I was given wings by letting myself have that. So it's really a beautiful and delicious thing. Yeah, there was something I wanted to say about that. I think it was, where did I write that down? In the back? No. Oh, I know. That's the creativity clue. So I'm going to tell you that at the end. I'm glad I didn't give it away. So, okay, the third piece. So let me just wrap that second community piece up. So please be willing to be open to find a community. You know, set the intention that you find a community that feels resonant to you, that feels like you are being held and empowered and not necessarily torn down, because there are two types of communities. You don't want to wallow in victim, you don't want to wallow in the problem, and you don't want to wallow in what's not working. You want a community that will help you have an upward gaze, that empowers you to seek for your solutions and in ways that feel right in your heart, right? So that's really, really important. That's the kind of community and the essence that you want to feel in a community that you would consider stepping into and being held by. It's a sacred honor to hold a community and to hold a container for other women to transform and heal. It's one of the things that I love most about the work I do, because I'm good at doing that. I'm good at holding a container. I've gotten better at it. I didn't used to be, but I'm better and really good at it now. And the reason why I'm good at it is because I allow spirit, I allow source, I allow the creative life force to do most of the work through me. I don't have this illusion that it's me. It's really source and the creative life force doing the work through me, and I allow that. I allow myself to be that instrument. So I would ask you to allow yourself to be held by that energy in a way that feels right for you. So our third point is the courage to connect to your creative life force. I know I sound like a broken record when I'm always having these conversations with you about the willingness to connect into your creative life force. It does take courage, but here's the cool thing. You probably know this. The root of the word courage is the French word for cœur. The French word is cœur, which is a heart. So courage comes from the heart, not your mind. Your mind, as we've talked about, we'll talk about this a little bit more next time, is really about protecting you. So it doesn't even look for courage. It just looks to shut you down. It just looks to make sure you don't take those steps, whereas your heart gives you what it is required for you to take the step and move in the direction of your greatest desire, right? So, yeah, I guess it does take the courage to, you know, so the stuff that's in the gap, it takes courage, and you can only find that in your heart. It takes courage to do the work of transforming that energy in order for it to be served back to you in a higher form, a higher serving and more serving form. And the thing that happens in a creative healing process, and this is based on research actually, is that there's this alchemy that happens. There's this transformational alchemy that happens when you have an intention to transform something that isn't working into something that will work for you and be more serving for you, in order that you may take those steps, or I guess it would be this way, take those steps from where you are over the bridge to where you want to be. That gap, that moat filled with your fears and the things that are nipping at your heels, a creative healing process, when you're in it and you're present with it, alchemy happens and all of that stuff gets transformed. Maybe not every single one of your fears, but those that are related to where you are and where you want to be, because that's the intention, right? We go in with a very clear intention that here's where I am, I feel stuck, here's where I want to be, I don't know how to get there, this keeps coming up, This is the intention for the transformation. And in the process, your creative life force drops in, because it's by invitation that you allow that to happen. And the alchemy is literally magic. I know I've used that word before, but that's where the magic and miracles happen, literally in that process. It has happened for me so many times. It's happened for so many, hundreds of women that I've worked with, and it happens every time. So don't think that it won't happen for you. And if it's not happening on your own, then consider that we work together so that you could be held and get that feeling in your body. What does it feel like to actually feel that alchemy? It's one of the juiciest things I've experienced in life. So yeah, that is right. So what the point is that you're creating when you use your courage to transform energy, that's in part what helps you create a new default mode from the being hard on yourself to the self-compassion part as you do all that transforming of energy. So that's it. So I'm going to tell you the juicy creativity clue, but just to sort of do our recap, we had the idea that minding the gap is so important in order that we may shift our default mode from being hard on ourselves and feeling like we're not enough, and to the new default mode of self-acceptance and self-compassion, which ultimately leads to self-love. You really aren't going to find self-love inside of a spinning mind that's really hard on yourself. Those are two different tracks, and you have to learn how to create a different track for that self-acceptance and self-compassion, which then becomes your new default. And the second point we made is how much better women work when they're in community with other women who have an upward gaze, who are empowering and supportive. And to really, if you don't have a community like that, especially that is focused on creative healing, then find one that feels resonant for you. And then our third point was accessing the courage of our heart, remembering that we won't really find courage so much in our minds. What happens, we have sometimes seen, we see it in movies, Braveheart comes up, is if the mind says, okay, I'll go in, I'll do it, then the mind is accessing bravery, but it's the heart where we find our courage. And that's a different flavor of taking our step, right? Courage feels like we're literally being held by the light, whereas bravery is like, oh, okay, I'm doing this on my own, no one has my back, but I'm going to forge through and hopefully it goes well. There's a difference. And most women know that to take our energy, to build up enough energy to be brave, it's exhausting. And I don't know, myself included, many of us who have that much energy left to sort of build a momentum for bravery. But courage is different, because that's like an endless resource that we can tap into. We just have to learn and teach ourselves how to tap into that well, because it is endless. So, all right, let's talk about our creativity clue, which is, I heard from one of my teachers that years and years ago, her mother told her that she made a decision. This was decades ago, so this would probably, I'm doing the math loosely here, but it was probably in the 1950s or 60s that this woman decided that she mattered, and that she was going to operate for the rest of her life from a place that she mattered. And I am going to ask you, I'm going to call on you to find a place inside yourself where you can hold the energy that you matter. Now, this will morph over time as you uncover and discover more and more of your jewels and your gifts and your expressions, your divine expressions inside of you. And that as your creative life force shows you how much you do matter. But I call you to consider that you matter, and to bring that inside of yourself, to nestle it somewhere in your heart that you have easy access to any time throughout the day, every day, and visit it often. Now, here's what's really cool about that. matter, M-A-T-T-E-R, is what we are, right? We're matter. Although only 4% of us is physical matter. 96% of us is basically light. We're basically photon based. But most of us have all of our focus on this physical matter part. And you do matter. You matter so much at every level of your being, whether that's the mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual, etheric, light body level. You matter so much that you can't even get your arms around that at this point. This is what your creative life force will help you to see. How much you matter, how gorgeous you are, how beautiful you are, how filled with divine love and light you actually are, that you have access to at any point that you pivot and line up with that exact energy. And that happens in creative healing processes. So not to mention that we're often playing with color in the creative process. So it's a beautiful dance. It's a lovely, kind of, well, dance is the best word. So again, the invitation is to, I invite you to consider that you matter and to look for clues and for feedback from the universe all throughout your day, affirming to you that you do matter. Okay, and I like to write those things down because then they can be celebrated. They don't get lost in the busyness of a mind. But if you record those moments, they'll grow over time, and you'll realize how much you do matter. And making decisions from a place that you matter is very different than making decisions from the place of not being enough. Why bother? You don't have anything to offer anyway. That kind of thing. Those are two very different foundations and call in very different choices for us to make for ourselves. So next week's topic, again, is the difference between mind and body intelligence. It's very interesting, this difference, and what it means to learn to listen to the wisdom and intelligence that is you, that is in your body, that's in every cell of your being. It's so juicy. And so I would also ask you that if you feel like this information would be helpful for any of your family and friends, then please share it with them. Send it along, and let's all create an evolutionary statement that creative life force is what will heal the planet. That's my belief, and I'm inviting you to join me. So on that happy note, Laurie Morse signing off, 5-Element Creative Healing. Go ahead and share this if you feel inclined, and I'll see you next week.